I'm going to rank the 140 possible users of this new arcane weapon, and I am so excited about these. Couple things, the rubric here. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is inheritance availability. What this really means is movement type. This type of weapon needs a whole lot of inheritance around it, and we're going to explain that in just a second. The next is stat distribution. Since we don't have any special weapons and no real special effects that are allowed to be on the unit along with these, that means that we are basing this purely on stats because that's all we have. The next is currency cost of unit. Basically, I'm saying if this is a 5-star locked unit, they rank lower than a 3 or 4-star because, again, it just means stats. Now, the last one is preference skills and weapons. All of those, for the most part, I've demoted. All right, let's look at the weapon first, though. Now, this is Rearmed Lif. This is Arcane Elginir. It has Slaying, Attack Defense -6, a guaranteed follow-up, a wary effect, and guard. Does this look familiar? Because it should. This is Maltet, but you get to refine it, so there are also extra stats. It means that we are going to have even more adaptability with our units, even more differentiation between how the individual ones look. It's really neat. I can't wait for more of these. But let's get into the monstrosity that is this tier list. Boom. So many units. I divided these up. Let's get L tier out of the way because this one is an easy one. Preference skills. Since we can't equip the arcane weapons along with preference skills, like what I'm showing here in Selef's Holy War's End, that means most of these units, if they're reliant on those, are taken out. I am not happy about this, and I've had discussions about this all day. There are folks that say this is a way of balancing, and I just don't agree. I think if your preference weapon was bad enough that you wanted to swap it out for Arcane Maltet, this would have been just fine. Case in point, another big beneficiary of this would have been Ike. Legendary Ike would have loved a different weapon. But you can see how this would go. Yeah. I understand they were trying to really boost up the 3 and 4-star units, not the legendaries, but I think this would have been fine. Anyway, you can see most of these. There's really no question here. Like, this is not something that we would have put on them anyway for the most part. Now, next up we have C tier. This is a little more complicated. This is mostly units that I feel like their preference weapon doesn't warrant an additional thing. I've put up here a borderline one, and the funny thing here is I've got Zelgius in C tier and I've got Black Knight in S tier. The reason is stats. Just pure and simple, that's what I'm worried about. It is easier to get merges on Black Knight, and I'm gonna pound the table for this so many times. You are only worried about stats and what you can inherit. So, if it's harder to get merges, then this unit ranks lower. If you've got a +10 Zelgius, then there are definitely things you can do. Most of us don't, though, and most of these units fall into that category, like even Swordheart with his dual brave weapon. I mean, for the most part, I'd keep that. You've got units like Yenfei that if you've got a +10 can actually do some really interesting things, but I've still got him down here in C tier. Moving on, these first two were nice and easy. Let's go to B tier, and this is where things get a little more controversial. I don't think that cavalry units are very good for these units because of the two things I said before. Stats are always lower on cavs, and the amount of inheritable weapons you have on sword calves right now is just not great. I kept on running into this same build that I had with Seth here. Yeah. Obviously, you can do some other things, but if you are trying to overcome like it's kind of a pseudo null follow-up, you can just use a flow skill. There are so many good ones for that. Please don't, if this is your favorite unit, you want to give them this arcane weapon, by all means go for it. But I think there are going to be better ones for you down the road than this. I don't think this was designed for calves. It's just not. Next up, we have the wonderful world of flyers, and it's the same deal. Looking at this Ashnard build here, this is not a bad build, and if you want to do this, I mean, you can get a lot of mileage out of this, but I don't believe you get the full effect from this weapon, just because if you compare these flyers to some of these infantry or armor builds that I'm going to show, they're just not as good. Both of these, the Cavs and the Flyers, one of the big things they suffer from is if you want to be in enemy phase, you need lots of stats, but they naturally have lower stats. Flyers in particular have to run Iote's shield in the enemy phase because they're worried about archers. This here is something I've made a melee specialist, but again, I don't have as many options for inheritables because on a melee specialist, really, why do I want attack defense near trace? And if they've got high speed anyway, again, there are definitely cases where you can overcome a double, an automatic double from an enemy unit. If you think of Cyros, it goes that way. But the melee units that we're seeing come out right now are in the Brave Crom and the Brave Seliph vein. And they hit hard, they hit fast, most of the time they have no follow-up. It's tough. So, the other thing is, if you're going to go another way with them and you're going to do Gale Force, they need to get a heavy blade check. They need higher attack than the unit they're going up against, and that is very difficult. You can ask Gale Force players, it's just hard to do. For that reason, I've got Cavs and Flyers in this B tier. This is weird because this is probably one of my favorite builds that I came up with in all of this. But if you are running a Gale Force Dancer, this is really fun. Now, there are some different individual things you can do with this. Like, I probably, instead of Speed Defense Tempo 3, you would want Wings of Mercy, for instance. Some other skill like that. Probably Wings of Mercy. The problem I'm looking at here is this is really expensive. Now, obviously, you don't have to go this hard on the unit, but this is still a really fun thing to look at, though, just looking at what you can do with some of these Gale Force Dancers. This is essentially, if you win the speed check, this is a one-tap Gale Force, which is fantastic. Yeah. Obviously, if you don't have the tempo, you might run into some guard, but I'm a big fan of this. I think this is a really fun build. If it was cheaper, then I would say go all in. And for some of you who use Gale Force as your main way of clearing AR maps, this might be worth it to you. So I wanted to bring this up. Again, this is one of my favorites. It's going to be practical to a few people, but not all of you. We're gonna get into the meat of this now. You notice I don't really have any builds on this, and the reason is, again, we're just looking at stats. That's it. As you look at the builds in S tier, the reason I've selected them is because there is something special about them with their stats, and sometimes that special is they have one more point of speed. So if one of your favorite units is in here, then you can use them in almost any of the builds I'm about to show up above. You can speed stack almost any of these units. I mean, to a mixed degree of effectiveness, but you can do it. You can defense stack, you can do all sorts of things. And that's one of the things that is so much fun about this weapon is how adaptable it is. You can use it in the enemy phase, you can use it in the player phase. Basically everything that you've been using Hector for, you can use, but now you have more movement. In case you can't tell, I'm a huge fan. Same with the armors. These are good armors. You can definitely make use of them. For you Drog fans, you got it. You got your refine. But I want to look now at some infantry builds. What we've got here is, first off, I know you're wondering why Alphonse is S tier. This is so debatable, but the thing is, this game forces you to use Alphons. You have to use this unit for a lot of things. It's why I recently upgraded his kit with like a Brave Sword and a bunch of other things. If you are wondering who to give this to and you don't have an option, this is it. And this makes him very good for clearing PvE things, which again, sometimes you just have to do. You can run some interesting things with him along with this. I've seen a speed stacked Alphons where you do basically a Gale Force and a Flashing Blade on there. That's a lot of fun. That is very niche and needs to be done on his bonus season in Aether Raids. But that can be done with this, to great effect. Anyway, the next one, this is more of a concept, but understand that Guy right now has the highest speed of any infantry, and having a 54 base speed unit is really good. At the end of this, he is speedy enough that he can deny most doubles, and that's really what you want. Obviously, you want enough speed to get the full effect out of your dodge you get from Speed Smoke and Godlike Reflexes. For those of you who are wondering why Godlike Reflexes, because he can't really loop it in the same way, understand that when you're going up against someone, and I'm particularly thinking about this unit for Aether Raids, the unit that hits the hardest goes first. So that unit is going to be the one that gets the Godlike Reflexes reduction. You hope somewhere in there you get back to the cooldown you need to, but that's not always the case. So understand this may be a thing where you have Godlike Reflexes on the first attack, you don't have it on the second attack, you have it on the third attack. But this is something, we've talked about this, but the Omni tanks are coming back, and this is an interesting candidate for that. So this is something you'll have to play with. The thing that I'm most worried about this is Brave Seliph, and he is the premier Cav damage dealer right now. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this unit survives that. You probably need something else to cover a team that has that plus 10 Brave Seliph. Moving on though, this is another interesting thing with Crom. I know you're wondering why Crom. And the biggest thing here was I was looking at bulk. And he has the highest bulk defensively, that HP plus defense of any other units that I looked at. And that makes him just an excellent frontliner for your far save. This is 110 bulk, and that's before we count in all of the other stuff that's going on. Understand that most of the C skills I'm showing you, they are optional, right? It is very team dependent when you talk about C skills. What I will say about Defense Res Smoke, the interesting thing that you can do is once they hit, or once they get hit, they have that Pathfinder ready to allow the rest of your team to circle around and maybe pick off some units, which can be very, very handy. But as you guys know, that's very, very expensive. That's on all of one unit right now. But understand this is also looking at builds that you can possibly get from Hollow Forms. That is a place where you can pick up all of this very expensive fodder. And we don't know yet if arcane weapons are going to be in the Hollow Forms pool. My guess is no. But just understand that that's something to be looking for. If you want to build one of these units and put an arcane weapon on them, you can start with fodder from a Hollow Forms Forma, and you get a huge leg up. But we're gonna get into my favorite of these, which is the armors. I think the armors won really big. Now, most of the units that I have in this S tier are easy to get because, again, availability is big. You can see that with Zephiel. I can't get enough out of Zephiel to really survive some of the bigger things. You can probably make him a far savior. He doesn't really have enough oomph. In the damage case or in the bulk. Like his res is just going to be a detriment to him. But as a holding the line near savior, I think he's very good. It's going to be tough for him to kill a lot of things. And I'm thinking of some of the bulkier melee calves that we're getting, which are just seem to be everywhere right now. But I think this build right here could do you a lot of good. This could be a lot of fun. For you Zephyl users, this is fantastic. The next two, I'm going to talk about speed armors a little bit because these are really fun. And this is basically the same build, and they would benefit from a far save that also gave speed. But we've been seeing more and more speed armors, and I've been seeing the benefits of them. I will say the reason I have Manuela up there, she is a 4-star special, which is not the same as in the 3 or 4-star pool, as you guys know. But look at that speed. Like 56 speed, and you can see I've just gone all in on both of these units and also given them a floret. But particularly if you're a Manuela fan, if you wanted to do this build, I think this would be amazing on her and worthy of a floret. You could do so much with this. I'll also say that Hardy Fighter synergizes very well with these arcane weapons, as we've seen throughout this entire last year. They really like melee armors. But yeah, this is a lot of speed. I think I did the math, and I'll apologize if I get this wrong on the spot, but I was getting a lot of speed out of Manuela and enough to deny doubles out of some of the bigger units. And that's huge, especially when you're talking about Aegis. You can stop things like Duochrom's Deadeye if he has it procced, or the combination of these two actually stops him from doubling. So that's nice to have enough speed to where you can deny doubles. Yeah. I am a huge fan of these speed armors. I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun with them. I don't like Savvy Fighter as much. It's possible to use it. I'm just, especially on Manuela, like she's getting up into the amount of speed that Savvy Fighter could be usable. That's just very hard. The reason it's so good on Valentine Lucina is because she's just so speed stacked. But anyway, Summoners, both of these are fantastic builds. The next one, these are special units. I'm going to start with Hector here. The reason he's special is because of his duo skill, right? If you look at the stat lines of these other units, obviously he doesn't measure up as much. He has more attack, but not as much bulk. I still think this would be a very good near save unit that at the very end of the game in AR, if you needed, you could pop that duo skill and maybe get that last fallen Edelgard out of the way. None of us struggle with her anymore, right? But if you have other tanks like that, this is something where you can really knock the edge off. If you're in something like Summoner Duels, again, I mean, this is something where if your Far Savior can also hit a duo skill, that's huge, huge. So this is something that's fun to look at. This takes a lot of investment. Not all of us have duo Hectors at +10, especially now that Elder V quit. There might not be any. But this other unit, this is really interesting. And if we compare the bulk, he has significantly more bulk than Zephyl defensively. This is enough to where if you wanted to use him as a Far Savior in Aether Raids, I think you could do that. But what this is really designed for, what I'm looking at, is Summoner Duels here. And I know not a lot of you like or enjoy that game. This is really good, and I've done some sims. I don't have the official weapon in there, so I don't want to post them. I've done kind of a kludged way of getting it in. This unit survives Duochrome with Catria support. Think about that. Like, that is nuts. This unit has so much bulk, and you've traded out a very good Brave weapon for essentially what is a wary effect and that guard. And what comes out is an incredibly sturdy unit that can really maul stuff. I'm a huge fan. It is why I will be summoning for Leaf, because I want to use this build. I've been looking for an upgraded armor, and I think this can be very anti-meta and can help me in a lot of ways.
But I'm begging you.
Okay. Again, if we're looking back at the full tier list, any of those units in A tier can do the job that the S tier units are doing, with the exception of Duo Hector and Alphonse. The division between S and A tier is very, very slim. So understand that. Please don't have hurt feelings if one of your units is down below. The big check you want to look at is speed. That is the dividing factor. If they have high speed, you can do some different things. If they have low speed, you have more bulk and you can do some different things there. So just understand that as you're going in, that's really what you're looking for, is how much speed invested are the units. I like this arcane weapon better with the slower units that have more bulk. I think it takes more advantage of that auto double, but there are a lot of units now with null follow-up, so I understand if you're using this as kind of a pseudo null follow-up. I don't think that's a bad thing, because in these infantry units, it frees up your B skill. So, with that, I wanted to leave you with just a few thoughts. This is just other info that we've collected, and we're going to learn more in the coming days, but these units are fodder factories. Like, to my knowledge, you can put other skills on this and then fodder them to another unit, and they still have that because you're keeping that on them. So an infantry unit, for example, this is a cavalry, so it doesn't quite take into effect. But if we had an infantry with an arcane weapon, it would be very easy to inherit Vital Astra onto them and then give that to another unit. Arcane weapons only score 350. If you're familiar, preference weapons score 400. What this really means is if you're looking for an arena score bot, this is still a good unit, but it's not as good as it could have been. I understand why they did this. I don't like it, but I get it. We will get more of these, and the reason I put this down here is for you guys who are trying, don't force this on a unit, okay? Be very careful. I showed that Seth build up there, and I think that is one of the units where I don't know that this is good enough for you to go out and get Leaf, unless Seth is your favorite unit. I'm never going to tell you not to spend resources on your favorites. Just understand that, though. Be patient with your fodder. It usually pays off. The last thing, don't forget that these are only available on their specific banners. So that's probably this banner and then a rerun. So about 6 months down the road, you'll get another chance to get this unit. I guess you'll get 3 chances. One will be on a legendary banner, but you don't want to do that. But make sure that if you get multiple copies that you fodder both of their preference weapons off separately so that you can take full advantage of this. Summoners, I'm so excited about this. I think this is a fantastic addition to the game. I hope you guys are enjoying this. I send feedback to IS, tell them what an amazing job they did with this. Take care and schedule an appointment with your FEHologist real soon.